So today's guest needs very little introduction. He is, of course, Silver X Hawkins, okay? From the ACG gang. We're going to be talking about happiness, fulfillment, meaning of life, and, you know, some of that kind of deep stuff. And I love talking with Silver. He's kind of a very, he's an intellectual, right? And I'm a little bit out of my depth talking with him, of course, but it will be a lot of fun. And he's one of the best people I know. So I hope you enjoy the conversation and you get something out of it. So without further ado, let's get Silver X Hawkins on the line. One, two, Silver. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
It's going okay. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you. Thank you for actually asking. You know what? It's not very common that people ask back, so I appreciate it. Oh.
Well, I'm more interested in hearing how you are than I am in talking about how I am. So.
6 Foot Panda will do the basal appearance after, my dude. I appreciate that, though. Look at him all suited up. Very elegant. Very elegant. Thank you for doing this, man. It's been a while that, you know, I've wanted to have you on the show, and there's a lot we could talk about. But you suggested, you know, hey, let's talk about, a few things, but one of the things that I think speaks to me from what you say sometimes is, you know, everything surrounding the idea of happiness, fulfillment, you know, meaning, right. That kind of, you know, purpose, drive, right? And I think a lot of people struggle finding those. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about that. And to kind of ease the conversation in a little bit, let me give you, I guess, one thread for you to pull from, which is this illusory idea of happiness, where I think in every self-help book nowadays you see this thing where, you know, if you could only get to that place of happiness, you're set, right? You're good,
right? And
I think that's just fundamentally flawed, because life is change, right? Fundamentally, you're always changing. So
yeah,
this idea that you get to this place and everything is set is just, that's not how it works, right? So how do you think about, I suppose fulfillment is a better word for it instead of happiness, perhaps. How do you think about that? How do you find your meaning, your purpose? Give me a bit of that.
I think you touched on a key point, which is that life really is a struggle. Like, even if you do find fulfillment, like, keeping that feeling is going to be a continual struggle throughout. That's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge for every single person. And there is no one catch-all answer for that applies to everyone. I mean, that's what you need to understand, is that you're going to have to figure out these answers for yourself, because my answer is not necessarily going to be your answer. Like, I reached a point in my life where I was at a really, really low point. And I basically was faced with the choice of burying myself in a deep, dark hole, or making a decision that, no, this is not what I want. And I made the decision that that was not what I want, because I didn't see any way to come back from that hole. And so I took a long, hard look at myself, and I asked myself, what are the things that are really important to me? And very quickly, I arrived at the answer that what's important to me are the people who are in my life, the people I surround myself with. And right. There is no greater feeling to me than watching these people smile, or being like a positive influence on them, or knowing that I did something that made a positive difference to them. Yeah. That sort of gives me a feeling of purpose. And so that became my sort of driving motivation going forward, operating from that place of trying to be constructive, trying to be positive, and trying to, to an extent, trying to do good. But that sounds a little too corny, but yeah.
No, I think that's
a positive influence.
That's a real thing. You know, there's a real satisfaction in.
Everyone.
Yeah, ODM, how's it going? Welcome in. There's a real satisfaction that I think we're wired to get from being of service to others, whether it's making their day a bit lighter, with a smile, right? Or cracking a joke, or helping them with something. I think there's a real thing we get from that. The Void
I mean,
Soldier, thank you for the follow. Go
I
on.
think
Yeah.
people often underestimate how much of a difference small things can make. So just like smiling
Yeah.
to a person that you pass on the street and saying, "I hope you have a wonderful day,"
Right.
or
Or treating
like,
the delivery person like a person
yeah,
instead of
I
just
just
yeah.
just acknowledging people.
Yeah.
Like if you meet a homeless person on the street, don't just walk by them. Acknowledge the fact that they're actually there and the fact that they actually exist.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
that goes a very long way for people because we all want to feel like we matter. We all want to feel like we're important to some extent,
yeah,
and that's also, I think, why it's so gratifying to sort of be that positive influence, because it does feel like we matter at that point.
it does. Yeah. I think a lot of times we do underestimate the impact of what we have, for good and bad. The people who just reply to stuff on Twitter to be negative, I think maybe they also underestimate the negative effect that they have on other people with those negative comments. So I try to be very deliberate with responding to stuff in a
Yeah.
positive way, or just not responding. I don't really see much point in choosing to spend my time to actively respond to something that I dislike. I just kind of move on. And I
No,
think you have
that's
a
very
similar
smart.
take, right? On that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, I life sort of drove the point home at a very young age for me that it's fragile and
Yeah.
that things can change at a very on a dime. And I was sort of faced with my own mortality very early on, which I know to a lot of people can be very frightening, but to me it was
Yeah.
very liberating, because there was this sense that I know I'm going to die, so I have to make the time that I have up until that point count for something. Um,
Yeah.
and so I very, very quickly, I'm very difficult to anger, because I don't want to waste energy getting angry.
Yeah.
Um, like I only have so much time, I only have so much energy that I can use, and I would rather put that time and energy to other uses than anger. Um,
There's
that doesn't
something
mean I
you
never get
said.
angry, but it does mean that I have a higher threshold for it than a lot of
Yeah.
other people.
There's something you said, which is, what works for one person may not work for another person, which is why I think we all have to kind of find our
For
meaning,
sure.
right? Our purpose and all of that. But one thing that really spoke to me was this book. I'll post a link to it. I listened to it on Audible. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning, from I think it's from Dr. Frankl. Anyways, I don't know if you've read this book, Silver, but it basically, it's one of those like deep reads. It's very short, but it speaks about people who went through the Holocaust survivors. It's a little dark, but I'm not gonna go into the Holocaust stuff. But it's people who found meaning in life, even despite having gone through all of those horrible experiences. And the fact that the differentiator between the people who made it in some way and those who gave up was that sense of meaning and purpose. And the people who were able to find that were able to push through. So I think that idea is really powerful. Does that kind of speak to you or connect to something that you've thought about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the extent towards which people sort of know my background, but when I was very young, when I was like 20 or 19, I was in a romantic relationship with a woman I was very, very close to. We were basically what you could sort of tradition, or I guess what you could call soulmates. Like, we had a connection that was really, really close. We could finish each other's sentences. Like, I knew what she was thinking. She knew what I was thinking. But she moved to the United States, and shortly after that, she was murdered over there. She was gunned down in an
Yeah,
assault.
I heard
Um,
about that. I'm sorry, man. That sucks.
and and that sort of that shifted my entire reality from one day to the next, where I had had all these plans, we had all these ideas of what we wanted from life, what we expected from life, and all of a sudden they were gone.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like there was nothing there.
It's just
And
a
it became,
void, right? Where like the person's missing.
yeah,
Everything you were getting from that person is kind of gone.
yeah, that, and also just, yeah, the entire idea of a future, like everything
Yeah.
that, like the entire trajectory of where my life was supposed to go
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
suddenly gone.
So to put a
sudden-
positive
suddenly
spin
gone.
on that, because I find, at least for me, that my highest highs have come from like the lowest lows, to put it in a, you know, a cheesy clippable way. And was that something that for you caused you to maybe revisit some things, and, you know, maybe find something that gave you, you know, that purpose, that drive to kind of keep going?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really give me drive to keep going at the time,
Yeah, of
especially
course. Yeah.
because like the initial struggle afterwards was really with a lot of deep-seated guilt, because I was here in Denmark and she was in the United States when she died, and so I felt that I had failed her in that sense because she had died alone, and probably scared, and that I hadn't been there to, you know, the traditional patriarchal masculine role of protecting her.
Right. Protect with two
Yeah,
C's.
yeah,
Yeah.
or the idea that it should have been me rather than her, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I got a very, very deep and unhealthy sense of self-loathing that was really, really powerful.
So
And
how'd
really,
you
really,
overcome that? Because my focus is always like,
that
I'm
that
really
was
interested in seeing what are, you know, the tools that people use to get out of holes like that. So, you know, give us some of the things that help you.
I mean, that was really, really difficult, and to an extent, I'm still suffering from the after
Right.
effects of it. Like, it'll pop up on occasion. But it was also made all the more difficult because I was starting to suffer from nightmares as well when I went to sleep. So I would dream about the attack on her, and my mind would like conjure up scenarios that hadn't actually happened, but were
Yeah.
even worse than the reality of what had happened.
Right.
So sometimes, like, she would get raped, and I would be
Oh,
unable
man.
to help her, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Our
And
minds are sometimes our worst enemy, because
yeah,
we get into these negative thought patterns, right? And we kind of, we
and
can't
so
move past that.
and so eventually, as I touched on, I reached a point where I was feeling so low that I really had to sort of reckon with myself that you have a choice going forward in how you can deal with your life. You can either, and and then and I mean, and I also, you have a choice in how you can move forward with your life. And at that point, I sort of reached an epiphany of sorts where I said, you know, you shouldn't languish in this. It wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
And of course, that was also the really, really frustrating part about it, because I've always been a person who's been founded, I would like to tell myself, who's been founded in reason. And this wasn't like, this whole guilt aspect wasn't something I could reason
It's
my
not
way out of.
reasonable. Yeah.
No. So
If
I
you
could
think
tell,
about it objectively, you know it wasn't your fault, right?
yes,
But,
precisely. You
yeah.
could tell yourself that over and over again, but that voice at the back of your head would still go, nah, it was your fault.
Yeah.
And he would still keep saying that over and over and over
Yeah.
again. So I eventually reached the point where I said to myself, you have to stop languishing in the pain of the loss, and just be very grateful for the fact that you actually got to experience what you got to experience in terms of the love and the relationship there.
Yeah.
And the fact that you got to know her, the fact that you got to spend that time with her.
Yeah.
And
Just
yes, it came
cherish
to
those
an end.
moments, right? Those memories.
But focus on that rather than the fact that it's not there anymore, and then look forward to what is coming in the
Yeah.
days ahead.
I
And that
think,
sort of became how I sort of moved out of it.
yeah. One thing that's really important, and I think, is like the inner dialogue you have with yourself. In those can become so very toxic, right? In those times, one thing that helped me, I had some similar experience with loss, but not with people dying. Simply just people no longer being in my life, right? Which is like a lesser, let's say, evil of that, or a smaller version.
The dynamic is similar.
It's a similar dynamic in so far as I blamed myself right? Because, oh, that person left me, or because, I wasn't good enough, or that kind of thing. And at some point, as you say, you realize that, hey, I'm a reasonable guy. If I was to look at this objectively, I would tell a friend that it's not their fault, because it isn't, right? So one thing that helped me is something called Metta Meditation. And the basic idea of it is like, the way you start is you think of a friend, not a romantic, with no complications, someone who you want them to do well, right? There's no doubt that you just want that person to do well, to be free of pain and all of that. And you start thinking in those ways. So you kind of go through that, like, you just tell yourself and realize that you really want that person to be well, let's say. And then, like, with time, you move that to yourself. So instead of a friend, you move it to maybe a stranger. And then with time, you're able to do this exercise with yourself, where you do realize that actually, I really do just, want myself to do well and be well. And that kind of helped me restore a bit of the, self-esteem, self-love, and all of that. Is that kind of exercise something you've ever played with?
I don't think in that particular way. No. Like, I think especially when it comes to, I think for the foundation I sort of go from in nearly all of the dynamics in my life is sort of the sense of mortality, the certain sense of time is valuable. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, are really focused on the happily ever after.
Yeah.
And anything that doesn't match up to the happily ever after is a failure. So a romantic relationship that lasts maybe 5 years and then disintegrates is a failure. And I think that's a little warped way of perceiving it, because life is a journey, and every single person we meet on our journey is only there for a temporary time, unfortunately. Like, all our relationships are temporary. Maybe they will last to the end of our days, but that's still going to be temporary. So you have to sort of recognize that these people move in and out of your life, and just be grateful for what they contribute and the way in which they enrich your life while they're there, and then move on afterwards. That sort of became my entire way of, like, looking at friendships and romantic relationships. Like, I haven't been in a romantic relationship that I've ever regretted being in.
Right.
Like, I've been enormously grateful for all of them.
Yeah, I think it's really important to not be obsessed with, hey, is this gonna last forever? Because then you go into this kind of codependency and unhealthy attachment, where instead of enjoying the moment with that person, or being really present with what's going on and cherishing the time you spent with them, you're instead obsessing about the future and saying, wait, is this going well? Does this, you're kind of obsessing about, is this gonna last, right? Am I screwing things up? And I think that's kind of a common trap.
Like an ideal you might have in your mind of what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing on what it actually is, and sort of making the best of that.
Yeah.
Like,
go on. Sorry.
I'm in a long distance relationship at the moment, and it is difficult because we don't really see each other very often. We barely even talk sometimes because she's enormously busy. And we have a 9-hour time difference between us. She lives in California.
Wow.
But we make it work. It's an enormously fulfilling relationship, and a relationship that gives me a lot, and that I wouldn't trade for anything. But it isn't. It's certainly not a traditional relationship in the old sense. It's just our relationship, and one that we make work to the extent that we can.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think about, the traditional idea of marriage seems to me, I don't want to say obsolete, because I think it's beautiful, the ceremony and the commitment and all that. And I think that you can have the same commitment, but without necessarily, doing the the marriage thing, you can just
And the marriage is
choose.
just a piece of paper.
Right. Yeah, you can just find someone you really fucking like and then just choose to stick with them. And you don't necessarily have to say, hey, I'm going to be with you no matter what, even if you kill a person. But you can say, this is like the best time I've ever had. And, being with you is amazing, all of that stuff. And just kind of stick with that person, right? I think that's maybe sometimes underrated. The fact that you don't have to promise necessarily to unconditionally.
You don't have to fit your relationship into these societal norms that society expects of you. You can't just make it work for you in the way that you can, in whatever capacity you can. Yeah. I mean, I've always found it odd when it comes to love, because I find that I've always loved in a different way than a lot of other people, in that I love unconditionally. So I don't make demands in the way a lot of people do. I don't feel ownership of my partner.
Right.
I am monogamous by nature. I would never be with another person, but I don't make that demand. I wouldn't make that demand necessarily of my partner. If being with other people would make her happy,
right,
then that would be okay with me, if she would be honest and open about it.
Yeah, I think it's a communication thing, right? If you're very honest and you say, hey, I have these, like, I don't know, specific needs which involve being with more people than just one person, then I mean, I would be open to talk about it as well.
Because fundamentally, every single relationship in your life has to be founded on trust.
Yeah.
If there's no trust, then the relationship, whatever it is, whether it's friendship, whether it's romantic or whatever, it's built on sand. Because you have to be able to trust the other person.
That's well put. And we all know what things built out of sand go to. They get kicked by a kid in the beach, and then your sand castle is gone, right?
Yeah.
You think you got this perfect build, and it's gone.
Yeah.
So I did want to talk to you a little bit about morality, because you're one of those people who think about that kind of stuff. And I don't think of myself as someone like how to say this, like strictly moral, as in like every aspect of my life is held under scrutiny, and I'm this perfectly moral person. But I do think about stuff like, for example, suffering, right? I'm very aware that people out there are suffering a great deal, and because of some suffering that I've had in my own life, I'm highly sympathetic to that stuff. So one thing that I do is I try to strike a balance between being paralyzed by how much suffering there is out there and being aware of it, versus me just moving on with things and getting things done. So what I do, and I want to hear from you because I think you have a different take on this, what I do is like, hey, how can I help, right? So maybe I have some disposable income, and I say, every month I'm going to be donating to these causes that I think are good, and in a way that I don't have to revisit it every month. I don't need to be inspired by an ad on TV or something to donate, right? So that's just set, and I'm kind of, my guilt is, I don't have like a guilty thing at that point, because I'm doing what I can. I think that you expose yourself to a lot of whether it's documentaries or like articles about suffering around the world quite often. And I think you do it out of a sense of responsibility, that you want to be aware of what's going on around the world. But how do you strike a balance between, again, being paralyzed by all of this horrible stuff that's going on and, moving on with your life and being productive? Where's that balance for you?
I mean, it's difficult, and I think it's difficult for everyone. I mean, that's why so many people choose not to follow the news, because the news is often horrible. Like, I find, for me, one of the keys is often balancing it out with good news. So it is quite easy, actually, to find positive news stories that are inspiring and hopeful, and give you good cheer or whatever. That sort of counterbalance the more negative ones. But I mean, you're right. I feel a sense of responsibility in sort of in learning about other people's suffering, because yeah, there's a sense of acknowledging the fact that I see that you are suffering. I
Yeah.
see that you exist, and always remembering. I mean, I've seen horrific footage of the aftermath of drone strikes, like people and children blown apart, blown
Yeah.
wide open. And I've seen those pictures because it burns into my brain that there are ramifications to when a bomb drops. It's not just a
Right. It's
statistic.
not
It
just a number
is,
in the news.
yeah, it's a very real effect on the ground. It's a wedding blowing up or whatever, and it has a very real impact.
Hmm.
So you should never take these things lightly, the
Yeah.
way some people would like to. So it grounds me in that way, and that I find very helpful. Um, like Yeah, I mean, my main counterbalance is just going gravitating towards more positive news stories or escapism,
Yeah.
like video games or
Right.
literature or art or music or whatever. Yeah, like finding pleasure as well, because obviously, some of these stories are absolutely
Yeah,
horrific.
it's just brutal, right? Like
Yeah,
to some extent we can't even relate. It's so alien, right? Like when you look at some of these stories where they live in a hut with so sorry, someone is knocking on the door, just ignore that. It won't be urgent. But like someone is living in a hut without any access to power or water, right? Like
yeah,
we can't even imagine that stuff. And I come from Brazil, so there's poverty and stuff
yeah,
there, but that's like there's layers to this, there's levels to this shit. And some people are dealt a really shitty hand and they're born through no fault of their own, right? They're born in a shitty place. And yeah, I think we should do what we can to help them, but at some level I also think that we do have a responsibility as someone who has been dealt a better hand to to make an impact in the world. Small could be a small, right, but like in the positive direction. And so
mm,
I try to just to
yeah.
put the pin on that. I try to not be too paralyzed about that kind of stuff and uh, try to do my piece. But I find
Well,
that
that's really all
exposing
you can do.
myself, yeah, I find that exposing myself a lot to that kind of leaves me, just like stunned, if I just keep watching that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I think, easy for a lot of people to feel impotent because you don't really have any real power as a single person to affect
Yeah.
change in that way. But it is also important to realize that, like we touched on earlier, like little things can make a small difference. So, like maybe you can't like change the course of a war, but you can help make sure that one family gets a relief package of food that's going to feed them for a month,
Yeah.
and that's going to have a very, very real impact for that particular family in that particular month. And it may not feel like very much for you because of the distance and because you don't actually get to see
Yep.
the effects of what that help does, but that help does have very real ramifications in the real world. So I mean, all you can really do is try to make the best of it and try to do what you
Yeah.
feel is right. Like that's going to have to be a personal judgment that you're going to have to make. It's not my place to judge you one way or
Yeah. Yeah.
another.
Of course. Of
I
course.
struggle with my own a sense of what I can do and what I can't, and trying to do what feels right. Um, like I come from a place of like I was brought up very with a very very heavy sense of solidarity with my fellow man. Um, like no matter of where they're from, no matter where like race, creed. That's why I say brother and sister because I view
Right.
people as brothers and sisters regardless of whatever creed or nationality
Yeah. I
or
keep.
whatever that they have. And so I feel a sense of responsibility and kinship with them because we all share this planet. We all share the same fears. We all
Yep.
share the same existential dread, the same doubts, the same insecurity, the same anxieties. We
Yeah. I
are the
keep
same.
hoping. I keep hoping that we're past the point where we have to correct for inequalities of the past and being shitty to people of different colors and things like
Yeah.
that. I keep hoping that we're at a point where we can just get the best person to the job regardless of the color of their skin, and we can have a conversation without me having some kind of, agenda because you're part of some ethnicity or some group, or a certain gender. And I think in a lot of ways we are at that point, but it feels to me like sometimes we're still. Do you get this feeling that in some scenarios we are? I don't want to say overcorrecting, because the harm done was impossibly large, right? When you think about slavery and what some groups have been, what some of that stuff that's been done to those groups is kind of horrible, and I think it comes from a good place to try to make up for that. But do you think that maybe we're at a place where we can just say, hey, we're no longer doing those things, and we're now able to kind of just move past it, and we don't need a further label other than you're a fellow human being, let's say?
No, unfortunately, I do not. I don't. I mean, it's not as open as it used to be, but a lot of those like societal structures that were there in the past are still there now. I mean, you could look at like European policy towards Africa, like colonial policy, especially French policy in Africa, and it's abysmal. It is like unimaginably horrific. Same thing really with U.S. policy in South America. Um, like it's it's a colonialist, imperialist mindset that's still retained within the power structures of our society, and sort of, and it really. I mean, the problem is that it really sort of ingrains itself culturally in our consciousness to where we often don't think about it or are necessarily aware of it. It's just how we perceive things. It's the same thing really with gender roles, because those have been so culturally ingrained and built in us that we don't necessarily think deeper about them. They're just sort of there as part of our expectations of what
the main thing that worries me
conform into.
The main thing that worries me, Silver, is when you think about, for example, getting into a university. You know how in the United States, if you're Asian, you have like a higher requirement for your score to get in, for example, compared to like a white person. And in the opposite way, if you're a black person, you have a lower score. And again, that comes from a place of good, right? Trying to make up for harm done. But I think like in a case like that, what you're doing is you're saying you're getting in, but you're only getting in some cases because of the color of your skin. So if you're, in this case, in this example, if you're a black person and you get in with a lower score than other people, we're saying even though you scored lower, we're letting you in because of the color of your skin. And you're going to be in this environment where people have scored higher than you, and they're smart, like maybe they're just more intelligent or they're better at tests than you because they have a better score or something. Isn't that going to be shitty for that person coming in with like a lower ability to kind of perform well in that environment? Don't you think that actually would hurt that person in that example?
I think I don't necessarily agree with that particular framing that it's only because they have that particular skin color. I mean, that I don't think that's the dynamic at play. It's because, I mean, it is because they are that skin color, but the reason why that skin color is then given that it has to be given that advantage is that there are so many obstacles put in their way that to even get to that point where they're at is it's like by orders of magnitude a lot more than a lot of other people. Because unfortunately a lot of the social policies and so forth in these areas are far behind the times and are sort of deeply racially problematic. In how they're structured, like in terms of like social welfare systems, in terms of and especially, I mean, if we're talking about the United States, especially with the prison industrial complex for African Americans.
This is another interesting conversation I want to have with you, with the whole idea with prisons and this idea of punishment. I think that there's an interesting notion that to some extent, it's useful to think that we have, free will and volition, because we operate like that. It makes sense to think of us as agents and all of that. But to some extent, we're highly predetermined by what our physiology and upbringing is, right? To a pretty high extent, right? To the point where you take someone like a serial murderer, and a lot of time a serial killer, a lot of times they find, like physical things in their brain that, like really push them to be that way. Do you think that if we knew enough about the brain, we could look at a person and say that person is like that because of the brain they were born with, let's say, and maybe their upbringing as well, of course? Would that, in your mind, remove, your responsibility in some way? Let's say that, maybe you commit a crime and we know enough about science and the brain that it's directly linked to that. Would you say that in that case we should focus more on, rehabilitation versus punishment, or is there no connection for you?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, because that's been a major academic debate for over 50 years now. Is nurture versus environment versus genetics. Like, to what extent does one influence the other, and in terms of behavior? And I think we have to come down on the fact that we are all personally responsible for our behavior to some extent. And yeah, there are extenuating factors, but we have to be sort of personally responsible for ourselves as sort of as the foundation, like the foundational outset that we move from.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of prison judge, the prison system, I think I am a huge advocate for rehabilitation. I don't believe in
and I think the numbers,
because I don't think it benefits society at all.
I think the numbers support that, because we see in countries like, I don't know if it was, I think Norway has this really focused on rehabilitation, right?
We do as well, yeah. So
you guys do
is lower,
yeah. Exactly. So you don't see people committing crimes again nearly as often as you see in the US, for example, where it's
when they leave prison, they're more likely to get back into a job and reintegrate into society and stuff. Yeah. There's when Stasha, my girlfriend, got shot, I didn't hate the guy who did it.
Right.
I felt nothing but sadness, because what he did sort of ripped apart, but not only the people around Stasha and Stasha's life, but his own as well.
Yeah.
For his own family, for his own kin. When he went to Rikers in New York, because that's where it happened. I don't really bear him ill will. I hope he manages to rehabilitate and come out as a contributing member of society again. And manages to do something good with his life, and manages to get something good out of what was a horrific event on his part.
I think it's very intuitive and natural to have this knee-jerk reaction towards punishment. Like,
for sure.
Hey, this person did something horrible. Let's do something horrible back to them, right? Let's put them in jail for, I don't know, all of their life. Right?
Visceral and instinctive. There can be no doubt about that.
Yeah. And it's understandable, right? You suffered this personally, so. Yeah.
For sure it is. I totally understand people who feel that way, but it was never in me to sort of feel that way. And I also knew that Stasha would never want me to feel that way, because she was that kind of person. And it's also sort of informed just from watching one of my favorite people in the world, Desmond Tutu, former Archbishop in South Africa.
Yep.
Talk about forgiveness, because during the apartheid government of South Africa, the apartheid government obviously did absolutely horrific things to the black population of South Africa. And after Mandela's election and the abolishment of apartheid, they set down the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Tutu. which basically gave amnesty to all these people who had massacred, who had burned people alive, tortured them, done the most unimaginable things that you can imagine. The only condition was that they had to come forward, confess, and be completely open and honest in their confessions. And so you had this panel of judges led by Tutu sitting there, listening to these absolutely horrific accounts of events like dragging people through the streets, like skinning them alive, all these horrific stuff, and then you had to forgive them.
Yeah, that's brutal.
For these things. But like, I mean, Desmond, like Tutu said, it's this, like, the resentment of wanting revenge. It ties a knot in your chest, and it just eats away at you, little by little, throughout time. It doesn't go away, even if you do get revenge ostensibly, and you'll hear like next people who have lost people to murder, where the murderer is then executed, say that it just leaves you feeling empty afterwards. It doesn't feel particularly satisfying. So you have to
believe that.
You have to let go of it. You have to recognize that this is hurting me.
Yeah.
And if I don't let go of all this anger, all this resentment, all this deep-seated bitterness, it's going to destroy me.
Forgiveness part. I think what people miss is the forgiveness part is for you.
Yes, it's
not for the person. It's so that you can move on, right, and cut your losses at that point instead of wallowing in that shit. But I wanted to move to some more lighthearted territory. I wanted to run you through some like philosophical, I guess, thought experiments that are pretty classic and get your take on them, okay? So the first, let's start. I'll throw you a softball first. You're probably familiar with the trolley problem conundrum. Let me lay it out quickly. So you have this situation. Again, it's a thought experiment, so this is not real, people, right? This wouldn't be possible. But you have a group of 5 people on train tracks, and you have perfect information, and you know they're going to be hit by the wagon, right? So there's a wagon barreling down, and there's a switch in front of you, which if you press, will switch the tracks to the next track, in which there's only one person who you know will also get hit and die. So if you press the switch, that one person instead of the 5 will die in that case. What's your view in that situation? What would you do if you were in that perfect information scenario?
I mean, that seems like an incredibly artificial construct.
Absolutely. It's philosophy, my dude. Sometimes it gets a bit abstract.
But I mean, ostensibly, you would try to do what does the least harm.
I guess the juice of the question is, to some people, they have the intuition that as long as they don't press the button, it's not their fault, right? Because they haven't acted. However, if you think about it, no action is also a decision, and you have ownership over that, right? If you're driving on the road, you can choose to turn right, or you can choose to stay on track and go straight. Either way, that's a decision, right?
I mean, there's no better example of this than, I mean, the Holocaust that you touched on earlier, where I forget the exact quote after it, the exact quote from when it happened, but you know, first they came for the communists, then they came for the anarchists, then they came for the Jews, then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out, because they hadn't spoken out. They had just sat by in inaction.
Yeah.
Inaction is not making a choice. Is making a choice.
Is a choice in and of itself. Yeah. Woes Edits, what's up? This is just the conversation segment, and sometimes we do a bit of philosophy, which is I was really excited to have you on, Silver, because I know you can follow me and go beyond in some of these because you've read a ton of stuff. So it's kind of interesting to me. Lansby, what's up? Hello. So let me throw a twist in that, right? Let's say, because in that experiment, pressing a button isn't anything bad in and of itself, right? Because you're just saying, hey, I'm doing it for the greater good, right? And you're pressing that button.
It's still bad. You're still killing.
It's still bad, yeah. But there's some distance between the result and your action, right? You're not physically killing that person. However, here's another version, right? Imagine that you have, imagine one of those Wild West bridges with train tracks, right? In the middle of the bridge, there's the same group of 5 people. And what you can do is you can, let's say that there's some kind of platform above it, and you can choose to push a very fat man onto the tracks. And it's important that he's fat because he would be able to block the train, okay? So you would push the fat man if you choose to do so. He would fall on the tracks, die in the process, but block the train from killing the other 5 people. And you can't just throw yourself because you're not fat enough, okay? We need that specific fat man in order to be able to block the train. So this is like a similar thing, but instead of pushing a button, you have now pushed a person, right? So you actually killed him.
You're asking if I think there's a moral difference between like you physically pushing them and you just pushing a button.
Right.
The answer to that
does that make a difference to you?
No. I mean, the same reason why I think there's no difference between a person sitting behind a joystick, hitting the button on a drone operating, a drone operator, killing a person by hitting a button is exempt from the consequences of dropping that bomb.
Yeah.
Any more than the fighter pilot who fires the missile.
Exactly. Or like the drone attacks you talked about, right? I think that's actually a problem. There's so much distance between the person who gives the order.
You would be surprised, actually. Like the drone the drone operating unit in the United States Army is rampant with alcoholism and mental issues. Like I read some years ago an article in the German newspaper Der Spiegel about a former drone operator who quit. Who talked about he had, like, the first time he killed a person, he had been monitoring him for days. Like they watched them like play with their kids in the backyard. They watched them like leave for work in the morning, saying goodbye to their wives and stuff. Like they watched them in all these intimate moments where they're actually kind of close to their target because they're seeing them like play with their kids and whatnot. Then he dropped the bomb, and afterwards he sees the crater, and the guy's lying there with like his leg blown off, and he's still kind of alive. And when he left that morning, like he had to stop and throw up.
My God, yeah, that's what a shitty job, man.
Yeah,
talk about shitty jobs.
So like the whole thing, like the drone killings being just.
I meant like the person. I meant like the person giving the order. So Obama or whoever it is, like sitting in a room and saying, "Hey, go ahead," right? And for them, there's just like a few seconds between saying that and then they say, "Yeah, it's done." But yeah, they're kind of isolating themselves from the action itself. As you said, it's like an artificial scenario. It's not something that would happen, and we wouldn't be able to apply any of these, let's say, like conclusions to anything broad. Because if you said, "Hey, we're just trying to maximize the amount of lives saved," imagine how horrible. You could. An extension of that, an absurd extension would be you could be taken to the hospital at any point in time, and doctors could choose to take your organs to save 5 other people and kill you in the process because we're maximizing how many lives are saved. But you wouldn't want to live in a world where you could be taken like that at any point in time, right? In the same way, why does it matter once you die what happens to your body, right? You don't care because you're dead, you're gone, right? But it matters to us that we live in a world where, we pay respects, right? There is a ceremony, and we know that when we pass, there's going to be something similar to that done to us. That gives us some comfort. So there's more nuance to those questions than just this is the one variable we want to maximize, and that's it. As simple as that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of, a bit abstract conversation, but I wanted to get your take on that. My take is that ultimately, morality is something subjective in some sense, in the sense that, I don't believe that it comes from commandments. I think that we have to agree upon what is good, or what is it that we should try to maximize. And I think in our case, yeah, it's just well-being overall of humans on the planet. And I don't know about you though. Do you have a take on what it is we should kind of be looking?
It's interesting when you look at like ethics in a historical context, because one of the things you'll notice if you start to study like multiple religions, mythologies, and so forth, is how much carryover there is between like even different continents. Like so like one of the most popular is the golden rule. The rule that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In different incarnations, like sort of the negative variations of it, like don't do to others what you wouldn't have done to you. Sort of exists both in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, China with Confucius. Like it goes across like pretty much all of human civilization as sort of an ethical line that we seem to draw as a good and as a virtuous thing.
Yeah.
That I think has sort of stayed with every single human culture in our history.
Yeah.
So I think that's worth bearing in mind, that we've sort of tended traditionally to perceive that as being good intrinsically.
Yep. Yeah, I think we all have some intuitions, and some of them are deeply rooted in, as you say, in like historical stuff, and I think some others are just
that's not eye for an eye. Like eye for an eye is do what others do to you, like pay back with the same thing. That's not what it is. Like do unto others is treat others the way you would want to be treated. Like those are two different things.
Yeah, I think that I would take that, and what I would say is, if I was setting up the world and the outcomes for everybody, I would like to set it up in a way that, how they say when you have a pizza, one person cuts the pizza and the other person picks the piece, so that if you cut a ridiculously large slice, that person will just take the big slice.
Yeah.
Right. So you will take it upon you to make them as equal as possible, so that you get an equal slice. So I think like when setting up society and that kind of thing, that's the way I would think about it, is like, if I didn't know what role or what, part I would play in the outcome of this setup, how can I set it up so that, everybody's doing okay overall, instead of, some people doing fucking amazing and then other people being in the shit. Right.
It's not, but it's not do to others as they do to you. It's do to others as you would have them do to you.
Do to you, yeah. And
it's
that rule.
It's not do what they do to you. It's do what you would have them do to you.
Yes.
So treat them the way you want to be treated.
Yeah, act like you want others to act towards you, let's say. Yeah. Where does Silver and Johnny feel they derive their morality from? Family, religion, experiences. Silver?
I mean, all of it. well, not really religion as such, so much
Yeah.
as reading. Yeah, I mean, read by all means, read religious texts, read philosophical text, read as many texts that deals with ethical questions as you can. Go to Buddhism, like, I find that the most effective way to deal with religion is to pick and choose the parts you find useful. So take a couple of parts from Buddhism, take a couple of parts from Hinduism, take a couple of parts from Christianity or Islam, and just mix it together into what feels right for you and what feels like an ethical standard of living for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Ultimately, I think we all have to use our coconut a little bit, right? I don't believe in
Yeah.
this, like, prescriptive thing that someone wrote. Like someone wrote a book 1,000 years ago, and they're
Yeah.
like, hey, here's what you gotta do. Well, things kind of change, right? Where's my year 2000 patch? Right? So can we patch out the slavery and the rape stuff, or is that? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's like reasoning about stuff, and like I say, if I didn't know where I was gonna end up, how can I set things up in a way that everybody is kind of okay, is doing okay? So I think about it in those terms, but it's ultimately, I don't think it's objective, like given to us in an objective way, but I think that most people would agree that we are ultimately trying to just maximize the well-being of people. And what I would say is that people who don't agree with that, I'm not necessarily interested in having a conversation with them. If they think that we should maximize the horribleness in the world and all of that, then they can have conversations with other people, but I'm not particularly interested in following that.
I mean, fundamentally, my sort of ethics or my morality is derived from love, from the idea of love supreme, like love all people, love even, like, love is not necessarily. I think this is a misunderstanding a lot of people engage in, that love is approval of a person's actions or something. You cannot love a person if you disapprove of their actions.
Yeah.
I think that is widely inaccurate. Like, I love all people. That doesn't mean that I approve of all people's actions or
condone.
or
Yeah.
condone them. Or, like, it just means that when I interact with them, I come from a place of love as a foundation, and that's been a determining factor in my life, or a guiding factor in my life, for as long as I can remember, really.
And I mean, I can't think of a better note to end this on. I just want to, before I go to my last question, is there anything you want to pimp out? Let me drop a link to your podcast, which you do with Citizens Leave. Again, sorry about the door, guys. Just ignore that for now. Which the film podcast you do with Sleeve is linked there. Last Edit podcast. Very interesting stuff. Is there anything you wanted to mention before I go to my last question?
Nah, just like a quote from what has sort of become my favorite quote from Albert Camus, my sort of favorite writer and philosopher, is if I had to write a book on morality, it would be 100 pages long. 99 of the pages would be blank, and on the last page I would write, "There is only one truth in life, and that is love."
And that is a beautiful thing.
How to end it.
That's I want to end it there, but my last question for you is, Silver, when you think about where we're going to be as a race, like a humanity, as a species, in, let's say, 20, 30 years from now, are you an optimist, pessimist?
I think that's a really difficult question, because
it's an impossible question, but give me your best shot.
I think we're going to see a very different society from the one that we have right now. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. Like, I hope it's going to be for the better. I hope, certainly, I think this pandemic exposed a lot of weaknesses about the way that we've chosen to structure our society and the priorities that we've sort of given to certain things over other things, that I hope maybe will be reevaluated, but especially as given that this is only really one challenge that we're faced with, we're still faced with global warming and potentially other coming pandemics. So mixed. Like I hope that we can learn enough to actually enact some changes, but time will tell if we can or not.
Good stuff. Silver, thank you for being on the show, man. I'll see you soon.
It's a pleasure.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. And
sorry, we cut you off there, my man. Thank you very, very much, Silver. It was a great conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed, and we'll have Silver back on the channel soon.